close to them before they would start up in alarm. The sanderlings running, the willets flying up, crying. Black skimmers flew along the ocean's edge, silhouetted against the dull metallic gleam. Or they went flitting above the sand like large, dimly seen moths. Sometimes they skimmed the winding creeks of tidal water, where little spreading surface ripples marked the presence of small fish.
Let's pause for a moment and just point out the ways in which you can learn from a text. For example, I could give you worksheets over the parts of speech. Nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs. And we could do those silly little worksheets over and over again to learn something as probably insignificantly silly as parts of speech. But I'm way more interested in the ways in which a genius writer like Rachel Carson is able to use parts of speech to effect. Take a look on page 160, notice. At the very first lines, she wants to tell you something that maybe you've never seen before. Life form, marine life, in a cave sitting way back that usually most of the year is filled with salt water. See, and look at how she says it. In the surge at the rim of the ledge, the dark fronds of oar weeds swayed. By the way, the word swayed is a great verb, isn't it? It in the language even has that sense of movement. Smooth and gleaming, and now we've got another simile, as leather. Now that's an interesting simile. She's writing about marine life and she uses a simile like leather? And yet, somehow you've seen leather before, and so you know what that one looks like. Notice, keep reading. The projecting ledge was the path to the small hidden cave in its pool. She's going to spend some time with this magic pool. Occasionally, a swell, stronger than the rest, rolled, look at your adverb, smoothly. By the way, did you notice all these S sounds, what we call sibilants in linguistics, S sounds? Notice when you have water going back and forth, it has a rhythmic sound that's kind of like that S sound, right? So she's playing games with us there. Over the rim and broken foam against the cliff. Notice a little bit further down at the very bottom of page 160. They would sway. Notice how she likes to use this verb again. They would sway on their slender stalks. Are you hearing all those S sounds? Now, here's the question. Is this intentional or is this accidental? No. Gifted writers will do this intentionally. All the use of those S sounds. Read it with me again. They would, last 4 lines on page 160. They would sway on their slender stalks, and their long tentacles would sweep the returning water, finding in it all that they needed for life. Of course, jump over to page 161 and her descriptions of now the birds coming. The flats were astir with birds. Astir is a great word, right? Because it means that they arrive, but it also means to stir up, right? The birds start to stir up. She starts to talk about the birds then became only dark shadows, right? That is to say, again, we've got our metaphors happening. But I'm going to point out something that's going to blow your mind. Take a look at the rhythms as Rachel Carson is writing prose. Then birds became only dark shadows with no color. We've got some iambic pentametry. Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. The genius of the rhythms. That is to say, she likes that ba-bum rhythm. By the way, if you want to go through this and just identify the ways in which iambic ba-bum is a rhythm that she keeps coming back to, makes sense. Let's jump to 2b. Makes sense that she would play around with iambic rhythms because she's talking about the rhythm of the sea onto the shoreline. Whoa! Interesting. So in other words, if Shakespeare can play the game in Romeo and Juliet, a pair, a star, cross lovers, take their life, she can play the same game over and over again. Start to identify in your reading the ways that that's happening. How about this one? Black skimmers flew along the ocean's edge, silhouetted against the dull metallic gleam. Or they went flitting above the sand, like wonderful verbs, right? Her verbs are selected intentionally. Above the sand, again another simile, like large, dimly seen moths. Sometimes they skimmed, see it? Sometimes they skimmed the winding creeks of tidal water. Do you see it? Right? where like spreading surface, notice all our S's again, spreading surface ripples, what a wonderful verb, right? Word, ripples mark the presence of small fish. So in other words, I want to point out at level 2B, while she's obviously writing to you, where fundamentally she is saying at 2A, we can write this down. The ocean is really cool. The land is really cool. But the coolest place is when the two meet. Because there's all kinds of amazing things that happen when the two meet. She could have just said that in one line, but instead what she's trying to do is what all great writers do. I would write this down. Great writers, they show, they don't tell. They show, they don't tell. This is what Rachel Carson is so gifted at, right? You can see it in your mind's eye. For those of us that have been to the ocean and we love it, we know exactly what she's talking about. For those of us who have never been to the ocean, now all of a sudden we go, you know what? At least once in my life, I got to get out of this desert mountainous region. I got to get to an ocean. And when I get to the ocean, as one of my students once said after studying this, she had never seen the ocean, grown up on a ranch all her life, had never seen the ocean. But when she came back the summer after her sophomore year, she had to report, this essay was ever present in her mind the moment she saw the ocean. Oh yeah, there was that essay I read by that woman, Rachel Carson, where she was celebrating the way that life is so amazing. Can I say this out loud? Let's make sure that we never again say life is boring. The world is anything but boring. I mean, that's exactly what science and biology has to teach us and remind us. Life is really remarkable. All right, let's keep going now to finish this little essay, wonderful little essay that Rachel Carson's giving to us.
The shore at night is a different world, in which the very darkness that hides the distractions of daylight brings into sharper focus the elemental realities. Once, exploring the night beach, I surprised a small ghost crab in the searching beam of my torch. He was lying in a pit he had dug just above the surf, as though watching the sea and waiting. The blackness of the night possessed water, air, and beach. It was the darkness of an older world, before man.
162.
There was no sound but the all-enveloping primeval sounds of wind blowing over water and sand, and of waves crashing on the beach. There was no other visible life, just one small crab near the sea. I have seen hundreds of ghost crabs in other settings, but suddenly I was filled with the odd sensation that for the first time I knew the creature in its own world, that I understood as never before the essence of its being. In that moment, time was suspended. The world to which I belonged did not exist, and I might have been an onlooker from outer space. The little crab alone with the sea became a symbol that stood for life itself, for the delicate, destructible, yet incredibly vital force that somehow holds its place amid the harsh realities of the inorganic world.
Just pause for a moment, write it down at level 1. She says, you want to know something amazing? If the shore is amazing in the day, it's even more amazing in the night. And she says, you know, I saw something I had seen many times before. And it was as if I was seeing it for the first time, this amazing little crab, right? And the idea that seeing this ghost crab for the first time, she says, I've seen many of them. Can we put this in your notes at 2A? A major message. See your world as if for the first time. What an amazing insight, right? See your world as if for the first time. We grow accustomed and take for granted a tree. We've often referenced Ruthie's tree. And the ways in which we look at things but we don't see them. She says it this way. Suddenly I was filled with the odd sensation that for the first time I knew the creature in its own world. That I understood as never before the essence of its being. In that moment, time was suspended. When you have these kinds of insights, it's as if the world stands still, and all of a sudden, you are all alone with just the world of nature to blow your mind. Of course, it's always a challenge to say, why can't we more regularly see things that way? We might appreciate our lives so much more if we could. All right, let's enjoy some more.
The sense of creation comes with memories of a southern coast, where the sea and the mangroves working together are building a wilderness of thousands of small islands off the southwestern coast of Florida separated from each other by a tortuous pattern of bays, lagoons, and narrow waterways. I remember a winter day when the sky was blue and drenched with sunlight. Though there was no wind, one was conscious of flowing air like cold, clear crystal. I had landed on the surf-washed tip of one of those islands, and then worked my way around to the sheltered bayside. There I found the tide far out, exposing the broad mudflat of a cove bordered by the mangroves with their twisted branches, their glossy leaves and their long prop roots reaching down, grasping and holding the mud, building the land out a little more, then again a little more. The mudflats were strewn with the shells of that small, exquisitely colored mollusk, the rose tellin, looking like scattered petals of pink roses.
163.
There must have been a colony nearby, living buried just under the surface of the mud. At first, the only creature visible was a small heron in gray and rusty plumage, a reddish egret that waded across the flat with the stealthy, hesitant movements of its kind. But other land creatures had been there, for a line of fresh tracks wound in and out among the mangrove roots, marking the path of a raccoon feeding on the oysters that gripped the supporting roots with projections from their shells. Soon I found the tracks of a shorebird, probably a sanderling, and followed them a little. Then they turned toward the water and were lost, for the tide had erased them and made them as though they had never been. Looking out over the cove, I felt a strong sense of the interchangeability of land and sea in this marginal world of the shore.
The title, right?
And of the links between the life of the two. There was also an awareness of the past and of the continuing flow of time, obliterating much that had gone before, as the sea had that morning washed away the tracks of the bird. The sequence and meaning of the drift of time were quietly summarized in the existence of hundreds of small snails, the mangrove periwinkles, browsing on the branches and roots of the trees. Once their ancestors had been sea dwellers, bound to the salt waters by every tie of their life processes. Little by little, over the thousands and millions of years the ties had been broken, the snails had adjusted themselves to life out of water. And now today they were living many feet above the tide, to which they only occasionally returned. And perhaps, who could say how many ages hence, there would be in their descendants not even this gesture of remembrance for the sea. The spiral shells of other snails, these quite minute, left winding tracks on the mud as they moved about in search of food. They were horn shells, and when I saw them, I had a nostalgic moment when I wished I might see what Audubon saw a century and more ago. For such little horn shells were the food of the flamenco, once so numerous on this coast. And when I half closed my eyes, I could almost imagine a flock of these magnificent flame birds feeding in that cove, filling it with their color. It was a mere yesterday in the life of the earth that they were there. In nature, time and space are relative matters, perhaps most truly perceived subjectively in occasional flashes of insight, sparked by such a magical hour and place. There is a common thread that links these scenes and memories, the spectacle of life in all its varied manifestations as it has appeared, evolved, and sometimes died out. Underlying the beauty of the spectacle, there is meaning and significance. It is the elusiveness of that meaning that haunts us, that sends us again and again into the natural world where the key to the riddle is hidden. It sends us back to the edge of the sea, where the drama of life played its first scene on earth, and perhaps even its prelude, where the forces of evolution are at work today, as they have been since the appearance of what we know as life, and where the spectacle of living creatures faced by the cosmic realities of their world is crystal clear.
I want to go now to the end of this essay, and I want to talk about the ways in which Carson will go from the concrete to the ideal, to the idealistic, to the subjective, to the conceptual, if you will. Go back to page 163 really quickly. Pay attention to the ways that she starts to talk about the tracks. The tracks, of course, that is to say stuff left, right, in the ground, the tracks are in some ways symbolic. It's kind of like walking in the Badlands, yes, and all of a sudden you look down and you see a track, and you're like, uh-oh, what is that? Is it something small? Is it something big? Is it a coyote? Is it a dog? Is it a wolf? What is it, right? Same gig being played here. By the way, just to remind, on 163, if you were reminded at all of where have I read something in my freshman year, a 3A observation, about the beauty of a bird, you'll remember our text Scarlet Ibis and from our freshman year. If you don't remember that one, go back to our freshman folder on learnstrong.net and watch and read and listen along again with that one. The beautiful Scarlet Ibis bird. The tracks and the following of the tracks take us to this strong sense of an interchangeability of land and sea in this marginal world. Obviously, the marginal world is the title of the essay, right? Where she says there was an awareness of the past and the continuing flow of time, obliterating much that had gone before, as the sea had that morning washed away the tracks of the bird. We think, of course, at 3A of Psalm of Life, lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime in departing, leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. That notion of footprints. But how she finishes the essay is most brilliant on page 164. She says, it was a mere yesterday in the life of the earth. Hey, have you thought about this? 1,000 years ago, Cloud Peak looked the way it looked today. 1,000 years. 1,000 years from now, Cloud Peak will look the way it looks today. You weren't here 1,000 years ago. You won't be here 1,000 years from now. Nature, go back to it. Nature has this ability to remind us. Read it again with me on page 164. In nature, time and space are relative matters, perhaps most truly perceived subjectively, in occasional flashes of insight sparked by such a magical hour and place. Nature teaches us something. This is, of course, the author's purpose. There is a common thread. We're all, sometimes this is called the great web of life, that notion that everything is somehow interconnected. There's a common thread that links these scenes and memories. The spectacle of life. By the way, did you notice the use of the dash? Did you see that? Right? Pay attention to that grammatical use of the dash. It's a pause where we're going to now finish the thought. The spectacle of life in all its varied manifestations as it has appeared, evolved, and sometimes died out. Underlying the beauty of the spectacle there is, here's the author's purpose, meaning and significance. In other words, she's not just saying that there's something beautiful about the shore. She's saying that when you visit the shore, you learn something about who you are in this very complex world, all somehow interconnected. It's the elusiveness of that meaning that haunts us, that sends us again and again into the natural world. By the way, we're giving you the answer why you love to walk in the Badlands, why you love to walk in the mountains. I had a student once that said, could care less about English class. In fact, I hate all school, but come October, I love to go hunting. Not because I love to kill things, but because I love to go up into the mountains and get lost out there. I'm never actually lost. Same argument being made here. There's something elusive. You can't explain it. You can't give words to it. Notice, elusiveness of that meaning that haunts us, that sends us again and again into the natural world, where the key to the riddle is hidden. What a beautifully poetic line. The key to the riddle is hidden. Ba-bum, ba-bum. It sends us back to the edge of the sea, where the drama of life, by the way, here we don't mean 7th grade drama, right? We mean what Shakespeare understood about drama. That is to say, on the stage, everything plays out, and we get to see the way the world is. When we study Julius Caesar together, we will identify, this is our life, where we have to cohabitate with people, and sometimes we can trust them, and sometimes we can't, and sometimes we can't even trust ourselves. The drama of life, right? Notice, the drama, she says, of life played its first scene on Earth, and perhaps even its prelude, where the forces of evolution are at work today. Notice the genius of this essay. She moves from the past to the present, to the future, as they have been since the appearance of what we know as life, and where the spectacle of living creatures faced by the cosmic realities of their world is crystal clear. That repetition of the C word to finish. All right, let's jump now to 2A really quickly. What is for you the major message here? What is it that this essay is trying to suggest for you? Some have argued this notion that it really is about this interconnectivity. I'm really a part, as Tennyson will say in his classic poem Ulysses. We'll study it in your senior year. I am a part of all that I have met. Walt Whitman wrote a great poem that you'll study in your junior year. There was a child went forth, and every day, whatever it is he saw, that is what he became. Same idea. We're all somehow interconnected. We have a tendency to see ourselves as me and you, as somehow separated and different. A study of nature says, no. We're all connected to each other in really profound and powerful ways. This, by the way, is the reason so many students love the study of science. There are some students who hate the study of science until they come to this realization. When you say you hate the study of science, biology, for example, you are saying you hate this. You hate you. You hate life. It makes absolutely no sense at all, right? You have to be alive to say that you hate living. It's insane, right? Of course, at 2B, the author's purpose, the idea of what it is Carson is trying to say and how she accomplishes that purpose. Notice the use of cause and effect, the symbiotic power. Also, we said it at 2B, let's write it there again. The beautiful rhythms of her prose is quite remarkable. Her intentional use of the iambic pattern, it's quite remarkable. Bum, 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 like the ocean moving. For those of you that have ever been to the ocean, and you've seen the tide and waves, you know exactly what we're talking about. There are people, students I've even taught, who at night go to sleep with the sound of the ocean